A virgin cleaning lady decides to take care of the daily bath of a paralyzed millionaire. But a broken man and a hidden past wouldn't stay silent for long. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. The sea crashed against the rocks of the village with the same persistence as always, but Emily knew this would be her last morning hearing that sound. At 17, she carried on her shoulders the weight of a life that never fully belonged to her. Her grandmother's death had left a void that not even the generosity of the parish could fill. Father Thomas, with his greying hair and understanding gaze, had secured an opportunity for her to work as a gardening apprentice at the Blackwood Mansion, an imposing property that dominated the horizon of the Florida coast like a castle forgotten by time. While packing her few possessions into a faded backpack, some of her grandmother's clothes, the sketchbook that was her greatest treasure, and a yellowed photograph where she smiled beside the only person who had loved her unconditionally, Emily felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. Her drawings were her secret language, the way she conversed with the world when words weren't enough. In them she captured shadows, imaginary faces and landscapes that existed only in her dreams. The Blackwood Mansion rose majestically against the blue-grey morning sky, its colonial walls embraced by lush vegetation that seemed to have a life of its own. Century-old ivy climbed the columns, creating patterns that changed with the sunlight. The gardens extended in terraces that descended toward the sea, where royal palms danced with the salty breeze. It was a place that breathed history, secrets, and a melancholic beauty that made Emily's heart race. Mrs. Walters, the housekeeper, a robust woman of about 60, received Emily at the back entrance. Her gaze was kind, but there was something cautious in her manner of speaking, as if she chose each word carefully. "You'll be working with Mr. Parker in the gardens," she explained, leading Emily through corridors lined with Portuguese tiles and antique portraits. "The master, he doesn't like much movement around the house. He prefers silence." There was a significant pause whenever she mentioned Nathan Blackwood, as if the name carried an invisible weight. Emily was installed in a small room at the back, simple but clean, with a window that overlooked the greenhouses where orchids of impossible shades grew, some almost black, others ghostly white. Mr. Parker, the head gardener, was a thin man bronzed by the sun, with hands that seemed extensions of the earth itself. In the first weeks, he taught Emily the secrets of cultivation, how to sense the thirst of plants, how to recognize diseases in the leaves, how to prepare the soil to receive new life. Emily's hands discovered they had their own memory. They seemed to know instinctively when a plant needed water, when the soil was sick, when a flower was about to bloom. It was as if all the connection she had lost with people she found in plants. During work breaks, she would sit under the shade of a century-old mango tree and draw, always drawings without complete faces, silhouettes of people who existed only in her imagination. It was on one of those afternoons, while watering the orchids in the main greenhouse, that Emily saw him for the first time. Nathan Blackwood walked slowly along the main garden path, with a posture that mixed elegance and melancholy. He was 42, but carried on his shoulders the weight of much more time. His dark hair had silver strands at the temples, and when he stopped to observe a rose bush, Emily could see his profile. Aristocratic features marked by a sadness that seemed to have taken root in his soul. He wore a white linen shirt and dark pants, simple but of a cut that betrayed quality. There was no ostentation in his appearance, just a sobriety that made him seem both older and younger at the same time. When his eyes met Emily's through the greenhouse glass, she felt as if the world stopped for an instant. They were dark grey, eyes deep as ancient wells, charged with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. He said nothing, just observed her for a few seconds that seemed eternal before resuming his walk. Emily stood there with water dripping from the hose onto the floor, feeling her heart beating erratically. That night she tried to draw those eyes, but her hands trembled so much that the lines came out crooked, imprecise. It was as if something inside her knew that that exchange of glances had changed everything, even before she understood what it meant. The following days passed in a careful dance of furtive glances and silences loaded with meaning. Emily discovered that Nathan had a habit of walking through the gardens always in the late afternoon, when the sun began to paint the sky in orange tones. She unconsciously adjusted her work schedule to be in the greenhouses during that period, pretending total concentration on the orchids while her eyes discreetly followed him. Nathan Blackwood was a man of few gestures, but each of his movements carried a natural elegance that Emily had never seen before. He frequently stopped to observe the plants, delicately touched the petals of flowers as if they were made of crystal, and sometimes remained motionless for long minutes, lost in thoughts that seemed to come from a very distant and painful place. It was on a Thursday, when a fine rain began to fall and Emily ran to take shelter in the begonia greenhouse, that he appeared at the door. He was wet, with hair stuck to his forehead and his transparent shirt clinging to his chest. "May I come in?" he asked, and his voice had a deep and melodious timbre that made Emily feel a shiver run down her spine. "Of course, sir," she answered, trying to control the nervousness that made her hands tremble. It was the first time they were alone in the same environment, and the air seemed to have become denser, loaded with a tension that Emily couldn't name. He approached the plants, examining them with the eye of someone who truly understood the subject. "You have special hands," he said, observing how the begonias under Emily's care seemed more vibrant than the others. "Mr. Parker told me that the plants respond differently to your touch." Emily felt her face heat up. "My grandmother used to say I inherited that from her, that some people are born knowing how to talk to the earth." She immediately regretted having spoken so much. Mrs. Walters had made it clear that the master preferred silence. But Nathan smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile, but one that completely transformed his expression. "Your grandmother was wise. And where did you learn to draw?" He had noticed the sketchbook that Emily always carried with her, left on a nearby bench. "On my own," she admitted, surprised that he had paid attention to this detail. "I've been drawing since I was a child. It's like it's my way of understanding the world." "May I see?" The question was asked with a delicacy that disarmed all of Emily's defenses. She picked up the sketchbook with trembling hands and handed it to him, anxiously observing as he leafed through the pages. Her drawings were good, she knew that, but she had never shown them to someone who clearly had access to true art, to culture, to refinement. Nathan examined each page with genuine attention. There were landscapes of the village where Emily had grown up, partial portraits of fishermen, studies of plants and flowers, and various attempts to capture human expressions, always incomplete faces, as if she were afraid to reveal too much about the people she drew. "You have talent," he said finally, returning the sketchbook. "True talent, but your drawings have a sadness, as if you were always observing life from a distance without participating in it." The words hit Emily like a punch to the stomach, because they were absolutely true. She had always been an observer, someone who stayed at the edges, who drew life instead of living it. "Maybe I don't know how to participate," she admitted in an almost inaudible voice. The rain had stopped, but neither of them moved to leave the greenhouse. Nathan came closer. Emily could smell his skin, a mixture of expensive soap, a discreet perfume, and something that was purely masculine. "You are too young to have so much melancholy in your eyes," he said, and his hand rose as if to touch her face, but stopped in the air, trembling slightly. "And you are too young to carry so much sadness on your shoulders," Emily responded without thinking, and immediately was startled by her own boldness. But Nathan didn't seem offended. Instead, his eyes intensified, as if she had touched on something that no one else had dared to mention. "You know nothing about me," he said, but there was no aggression in his voice, just a melancholic observation. "I know that you play the piano at night," Emily said, surprising herself again. "I hear it from my window. It's always the same song, sad and beautiful. And I know that sometimes you stop in the middle, as if you can't finish it." Nathan was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made Emily feel as if he were seeing through her soul. "It's Chopin," he said finally, "Nocturne in E-flat major. It was my wife's favorite song." The mention of his wife made something cold run through Emily's stomach. She knew from the whispers of the employees that there had been a wife who had disappeared years ago, but no one spoke clearly about the subject. Is she well?" she asked hesitantly. Nathan's expression closed instantly, like a door slamming shut. "She is no longer here," was all he said, and Emily understood that she had crossed an invisible line. He headed for the exit of the greenhouse, but before leaving, he turned around once more. "Emily," he said, pronouncing her name for the first time, and the sound of his voice saying those two syllables made something stir deeply inside her. "Keep drawing, but start drawing complete faces. Life deserves to be seen in its entirety." Nathan's words echoed in Emily's mind for days. She began to draw obsessively, trying to capture complete faces, but her hands seemed to have developed their own resistance. It was as if something inside her knew that seeing people whole with all their secrets and vulnerabilities exposed was too dangerous. The nights became her most anticipated and most feared moment. Punctually at 10 o'clock, the sound of the piano began to echo through the mansion. Emily would press her ear to the window of her little room and close her eyes, letting Chopin's notes envelop her like a melancholic embrace. Nathan played with impeccable technique, but there was something desperate in his interpretation, as if each note were an unshed tear. One night, the music stopped abruptly in the middle of a particularly intense musical phrase. Emily waited, heart racing, but there was only silence. Without thinking of the consequences, she put on a coat over her nightgown and left her room, walking barefoot through the dimly lit corridors of the mansion. She had never explored the house beyond the service areas, but something pulled her toward the sound or the absence of it. She found the music room following an instinct she didn't know she possessed. The door was ajar, and a golden light escaped through the crack. Emily peeked cautiously and saw Nathan sitting at the piano, his head in his hands, his shoulders curved in a posture of complete defeat. The grand piano dominated the elegant room, surrounded by shelves filled with sheet music and some paintings that Emily couldn't distinguish in the half-light. "Can't finish it?" she asked softly, gently pushing the door. Nathan raised his head quickly, but didn't seem surprised to see her. It was as if somehow he knew she would come. "You should be sleeping," he said, but his voice carried no reproach, just a kind of infinite weariness. "And so should you," Emily replied, entering the room with hesitant steps. Up close, she could see that he was wearing only a dark t-shirt and pants, his feet bare like hers. There was something intimate and vulnerable in this informality that made her heart race. "I don't sleep very well lately," he admitted, passing his fingers over the keys without producing sound. "Actually, I haven't slept well for a long time." Emily approached the piano, fascinated by the beauty of the instrument and by the lost expression on Nathan's face. "May I sit?" she asked, indicating the bench beside him. He hesitated for a moment, then made room for her. The bench was narrow, and when Emily sat down, their bodies were inevitably close. She could feel the heat emanating from him, the smell of his skin, the tension that vibrated in the air between them. "Why do you always stop at the same part?" she asked, observing the sheet music scattered over the piano. Nathan was silent, for so long that Emily thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, his fingers found the keys, and he played a few chords, exactly the chords where he always stopped. "This is where she used to turn the page for me," he said in a voice so low that Emily had to lean in to hear him. "Catherine, my wife, she would sit here beside me, exactly where you are sitting now, and when I reached this passage, she would turn the page of the sheet music." Emily felt a tightness in her chest, a mixture of compassion and something like jealousy, a feeling she had no right to feel. "What happened to her?" she asked gently. Nathan's fingers stopped over the keys. "She disappeared 3 years ago, simply wasn't here anymore when I woke up one morning, left only a note saying she couldn't live like this anymore." His voice was charged with a pain so deep that Emily felt the urge to touch him, to offer some kind of consolation. "Like what?" she insisted, knowing she was stepping on dangerous ground. Nathan turned to look at her, and in the golden light of the lamp, Emily could see unshed tears shining in his eyes. "She said I loved her too much, that my love was suffocating, possessive, that she felt like a butterfly trapped in a glass dome." He laughed bitterly. "Maybe she was right." "Did you look for her?" For months. I hired private detectives, offered rewards, searched every corner of this region, nothing. It's as if she simply ceased to exist. His fingers returned to the keys, playing the same melancholic chords. At first I had hope. I thought she would come back, that she would realize we had something special. But the months passed, then the years, and you never managed to turn the page, Emily completed, finally understanding the metaphor. Nathan looked at her with an intensity that made Emily feel as if she were being seen for the first time in her life. "You are very young to understand these things," he said, but there was something different in his voice, a note of discovery. "Maybe I'm too young for many things," Emily replied, feeling a courage that she didn't know where it came from. "But I'm not too young to recognize pain when I see it, and I'm not too young to want to help." Before she could think about what she was doing, Emily raised her hand and gently touched Nathan's face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. He closed his eyes at the contact, as if that simple touch was simultaneously the most necessary and most dangerous thing in the world. "Emily," he whispered her name like a prayer or a warning. "May I try?" she asked, indicating the sheet music. "May I try to turn the page for you?" Nathan opened his eyes and looked at her for a long moment, as if he were making a decision that would change everything. Finally, he nodded. He placed his fingers on the keys and began to play from the beginning. Emily watched attentively, memorizing the rhythm, the cadence, waiting for the crucial moment. When they reached the passage where he always stopped, Emily gently extended her hand and turned the page. Nathan hesitated for only a fraction of a second, then continued playing. The music flowed, beautiful and complete, to the end. When the last note faded in the air, they remained silent, still sitting side by side on the piano bench. Emily felt tears rolling down her face, moved by having been part of something so intimate and significant. "Thank you," Nathan said finally, his voice hoarse with emotion. Emily turned to him, and their faces were dangerously close. She could see every eyelash, every line of expression, every nuance of color in his dark gray eyes. The air between them seemed electrified, charged with possibilities and dangers. Time seemed suspended in that moment, with their faces inches apart and the echo of the music still vibrating in the air. Emily felt her heart beating so hard that she was sure Nathan could hear it. Her eyes lowered to his lips, and she saw when he made the same movement, observing her mouth with an intensity that made something contract deep in her belly. "I should send you away," Nathan whispered, but his hand rose to touch her face, his fingers delicately tracing the line of her cheek. "You are too young, too innocent. I have already destroyed one life through love." "Perhaps," Emily replied, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice. "The other person wasn't strong enough for your love. Perhaps she didn't know how to receive it." Nathan's eyes intensified, as if he were seeing something in her that he hadn't noticed before. "And would you know?" he asked, his voice loaded with a vulnerability that made Emily want to protect him from all the pain he had experienced. In response, Emily leaned slightly forward, closing the small distance between them. Their lips touched softly, hesitant at first, then with a growing intensity that surprised them both. Nathan deepened the kiss, his hands enveloping Emily's face, as if she were something precious and fragile that could disappear at any moment. When they separated, both were breathing irregularly. Emily had never been kissed like that, with so much passion, so much need, so much reverence. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes as if he were fighting against himself. "This is madness," he murmured. "You work here, you're so young. People will talk, they will judge." "Let them talk," Emily replied, finding a courage that she didn't know she possessed. "I don't care what others think. I care only about what I feel here." She placed her hand over her own heart, "and about what I see in your eyes." Nathan looked at her for a long moment, as if he were memorizing every detail of her face. "You don't know what you're getting into," he said, but there was less resistance in his voice now. "Then show me," Emily replied, her words coming out in a mixture of boldness and shyness that made her blush. The days that followed were a careful dance between desire and restraint. Nathan began to appear more frequently in the gardens, always finding excuses to talk with Emily about the plants, about her drawings, about the books that he insisted on lending to her. Emily discovered that he had an impressive private library filled with classics of American and world literature. Fitzgerald was a master at dissecting the complexities of the human heart, Nathan said one afternoon, handing Emily a copy of The Great Gatsby. Perhaps you will find some answers about love and jealousy in his pages. Emily accepted the book, her fingers deliberately brushing against his during the exchange. Are you jealous? She asked, observing his reaction. Terribly, he admitted without hesitation. It's one of my most dangerous flaws. At night, Emily voraciously read the books that Nathan lent her, discovering new worlds and feeling as if she were being educated by the very man who fascinated her. He had placed small notes in the margins of some books, personal comments, reflections, sometimes just a word that revealed what he had felt when reading a certain passage. It was during one of these nights of reading that Emily heard footsteps in the corridor. She opened the door of her room and found Nathan standing there, as if he had walked for hours trying to decide whether to knock on her door. "I can't sleep," he said simply. "Neither can I," Emily replied, opening the door wider. "Would you like to come in?" He hesitated for only a moment before entering the small room. It was the first time he was in her intimate space, and Emily felt strangely vulnerable and powerful at the same time. The room was simple, a small bed, a dresser, a chair where she used to sit to draw, but with Nathan there, the space seemed to shrink and intensify. "Did you read the book?" he asked, noticing Fitzgerald's novel on the table. "I'm in the middle," Emily replied. "Daisy irritates and fascinates me at the same time." Nathan smiled, a genuine smile that completely transformed his expression. "That's exactly the reaction." Fitzgerald wanted to provoke. He knew that the most interesting women are those who destabilize us. "And do I destabilize you?" Emily asked, approaching him. "Completely," he admitted, his hands finding her waist. "You make me question everything I thought I knew about myself." This time, when they kissed, there was less hesitation and more urgency. Nathan's hands explored Emily's curves over her thin nightgown, and she felt her body responding in ways she didn't know. When he began to kiss her neck, Emily let escape a low moan that made something contract in the belly of both. "Emily," he whispered against her. "Skin, if we don't stop now—" "I don't want to stop," she interrupted, her hands finding the buttons of his shirt. "I don't want to live just observing life anymore. I want to live it." Nathan moved slightly away to look into her eyes, looking for any sign of doubt. What he found was a mature determination that contrasted with her youth, a certainty that made him realize that Emily wasn't as innocent as she appeared, at least not in her soul. "Are you sure?" he asked one last time. In response, Emily finished, opening his shirt and let it fall to the floor. The soft light of the lamp created golden shadows on her skin, and Nathan felt as if he were seeing something sacred. He lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bed, where they made love with an intensity that surprised them both. He for the tenderness that he didn't know he still possessed. She for the passion she discovered existed within herself. When they finally fell asleep, intertwined in the small bed, Emily felt complete for the first time in her life. She had found not just a lover, but someone who truly saw her, who recognized her strength behind her apparent fragility. Nathan, in turn, felt as if he had awakened from a 3-year sleep, as if Emily had brought color back to a world that had become gray and lifeless. Emily woke up alone, but the pillow beside her still held Nathan's smell and the warmth of his body. A red rose was on the bedside table, along with a handwritten note. "You brought music back to my life. N." Her heart filled with a happiness that seemed too big to fit in her chest. The following days were like living in two parallel worlds. During the day, Emily continued her normal activities in the gardens, but now each gesture, each word exchanged with Nathan when they met casually, carried the delicious weight of their secret intimacy. He looked at her in a way that made her skin tingle, as if he were remembering every touch, every whisper from the night before. Mrs. Walters, however, began to cast curious glances at Emily. The housekeeper had that wisdom that comes from life. experience, and knew how to recognize the signs of a woman in love. "You're different, girl," she commented one morning, as Emily helped cut flowers for the vases in the main room. "There's a sparkle in your eyes that wasn't there before." Emily felt her face heat up but tried to disguise it. "I'm enjoying working here. I feel useful." Mrs. Walters made a sound that indicated she wasn't entirely convinced, but didn't insist on the subject. Instead, she changed to a more serious tone. "Emily, this house has seen a lot of pain, a lot of confusion. I just want you to be careful. Some paths, once traveled, have no return." The housekeeper's words echoed in Emily's mind for the rest of the day. There was something in them that sounded more like a warning than casual advice. When Nathan appeared that night in her room, she couldn't shake a strange sensation, as if someone were watching them. "What's wrong?" Nathan asked, noticing her restlessness as they lay together after another night of intense love. "Mrs. Walters said something today about this house having seen a lot of pain. What did she mean by that?" Nathan tensed beside her, and Emily immediately felt that she had touched on something delicate. "Margaret has worked here for 20 years, he said carefully. "She saw everything that happened with Catherine and me. She's probably worried that history will repeat itself." "And will it repeat?" Emily asked, turning to face him in the half-light. "No," he replied with a conviction that surprised her. "With you it's different. You are different." His hands found her face. Catherine was like a hothouse flower, beautiful but fragile. You have a strength that she never had, a capacity to love without losing yourself in love. Emily wanted to believe those words, but there was something in Nathan's voice that made her doubt if he really knew the difference between loving and possessing. In the following days, she began to notice small signs that left her uneasy. Nathan began to appear in the gardens more frequently, always finding excuses to be near her. Initially, Emily felt flattered by the attention, but gradually began to notice that he seemed bothered when she talked with Mr. Parker or with other employees of the house. "Do you need something from them?" he asked one afternoon, after seeing her laughing at a joke that the gardener had told. "It was just a conversation," Emily replied, finding the possessive tone in his voice strange. "I know. It's just that you have more important things to do. I have a surprise for you." The surprise was an improvised studio in one of the smaller rooms of the mansion, complete with easels, paints, brushes, and blank canvases. Emily was genuinely moved. No one had ever invested so much in her talent before. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed, exploring the materials. "But it must have cost a fortune." "You're worth any investment," Nathan said, embracing her from behind. "I want you to develop your gift. I want you to have everything you deserve." Emily threw herself into painting with a passion she didn't know she possessed. She discovered that she had a facility with colors, that she could capture not just the appearance of things, but their emotional essence. She painted landscapes of the gardens, portraits of the employees, and inevitably, various attempts to capture Nathan, always with that melancholic expression that seemed to define who he was. But as the days passed, Emily began to feel strangely isolated. Nathan suggested that she spend more time painting and less time working in the gardens. "You have too much talent to waste doing manual labor," he argued. "Let others take care of the plants. You were made for greater things." At first, Emily felt valued by this vision he had of her. But gradually she realized that she was losing contact with the people who had become her friends in the house. Mr. Parker began to seem distant, as if he had received instructions to keep his distance. Mrs. Walters greeted her politely, but there were no more those informal conversations that Emily so appreciated. One night, while painting alone in the studio, Emily heard voices coming from the corridor. She recognized Nathan's voice, speaking to someone in a low but firm tone. "I don't want her to be bothered with unnecessary work. She has more important things to do." "But, sir," it was Mrs. Walters' voice, "the girl likes to work in the gardens. It's good for her to have contact with other people, to keep her feet on the ground." "I know what's best for Emily," Nathan interrupted, and there was a coldness in his voice that Emily had never heard before. "She is special, has a gift that needs to be protected and cultivated. I don't want her to waste time with distractions." Emily stood still, the brush suspended in the air, feeling something cold form in her stomach. For the first time, Mrs. Walters' words about the house having seen a lot of pain began to make a sinister sense. Was Nathan trying to protect her or control her? Was his dedication love or possessiveness? That night when he came to her room, Emily tried to address the subject indirectly. "I miss working with the plants," she said as she nestled in his arms. "Why?" Nathan asked, his voice immediately tense. "Aren't you happy painting? Aren't you happy with what I've provided for you?" "I am," Emily hurried to reassure him, noticing how he had become defensive quickly. "It's just that I like to vary. I like to use my hands in different ways." "Your hands are too precious for the earth," he said, kissing her fingers one by one. "They are artists' hands. I need to protect them." Emily felt a shiver that had nothing to do with pleasure. There was something in Nathan's words, in the way he talked about protecting her, that reminded her of a golden cage. Beautiful, comfortable, but still a prison. The following weeks brought a strange routine for Emily. Nathan had completely reorganized her life in the mansion. She now spent mornings painting in the studio, afternoons reading the books he carefully selected for her, and nights in his arms. It was a life of privileges that anyone of her social origin would envy. But Emily began to feel as if she were losing something fundamental of herself. "You don't seem happy," Nathan observed one afternoon, finding her standing before a blank canvas, the brush motionless in her hand. "Is something bothering you?" Emily hesitated before answering. In recent days, she had noticed that any manifestation of discontent on her part left Nathan visibly disturbed, almost desperate to correct whatever was wrong. "Sometimes I feel as if I'm losing touch with who I really am," she said carefully. Nathan's eyes intensified, that familiar expression of someone fighting against internal demons. "You are becoming who you were always destined to be, an artist, a cultivated woman, not a simple gardener." "But I liked being a gardener," Emily insisted, feeling a courage grow inside her. "I liked feeling the earth between my fingers, seeing the plants grow because of my care." "That's because you never had a better option," Nathan approached, his hands enveloping her face. "Now you have. You have everything a woman can desire. Art, culture, love. Why look back?" There was something hypnotic in his voice, a conviction that almost made Emily doubt her own feelings. Almost. "And what if I want both things, art and gardening, love and the freedom of choice?" Nathan's expression changed subtly, a shadow passing through his eyes. "Freedom is an illusion, Emily. What exists is security or chaos. I offer you security, protection, a life that most women only dream of having." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Nathan's words echoed in her mind, mixed with the memories of similar conversations she had read in Fitzgerald's book. Was she becoming a modern Daisy, seen as a threat to the stability of the man who claimed to love her? It was during one of these sleepless nights that Emily decided to explore the mansion. She had never been explicitly forbidden from circulating around the house, but there was an entire wing that always remained closed, the rooms that, according to Mrs. Walters, had belonged to Catherine. Emily knew she was violating an invisible boundary, but her curiosity had become stronger than her prudence. The west wing of the mansion had an abandoned air that made the echo of her footsteps sound ghostly. The corridors were decorated with the same Portuguese tiles as the rest of the house, but there was a different quality in the light that filtered through the windows, as if the air itself carried memories of sadness. Emily found a door ajar, and after hesitating for just a moment, pushed it completely open. It was clearly a feminine room, walls painted in soft tones of pink and gold, delicate furniture that spoke of refined taste and abundant resources. But there was something disturbing in the way everything was preserved, as if the person who had lived there could return at any moment. Clothes still hung in the open wardrobe, expensive dresses, fur coats, shoes that had never known the wear of everyday use. On the dressing table, imported beauty products remained organized with a precision that suggested obsession more than care. It was when Emily opened the drawer of the desk that she found the diary, bound in soft leather with the initials KB, engraved in gold on the cover, Catherine Blackwood. Emily knew she shouldn't read it, that she was invading the privacy of a woman who had disappeared, but something stronger than conscience impelled her. The first pages dated from 5 years ago and spoke of an ardent and reciprocated love. Catherine described Nathan as a passionate, attentive man who made her feel like the most loved woman in the world. Emily recognized every word, every feeling described, because she had experienced exactly the same sensations in the last few months. But as the pages advanced, the tone changed. Catherine began to mention how Nathan had become too protective, how he worried excessively about her safety and well-being. "He doesn't like when I go out alone," she wrote. "He says the world is too dangerous for a woman like me. Sometimes I feel like a porcelain doll in his collection." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The similarities with her own situation were impossible to ignore. She continued reading, her hands trembling slightly. "Nathan cancelled my piano lesson, said I didn't need teachers when I had him. He also cancelled my meetings with my friends. 'Why do you need them when you have me?' he asks. And I don't know how to respond, because really, why would I need them?" The following pages documented a progressive isolation. Catherine described how she had lost contact with friends, how she had abandoned hobbies she loved, how her life had become entirely centered on Nathan and his desires for her. "Today, he suggested I stop painting, said my art made him uneasy, that there was too much darkness in my paintings. But how can I paint only light when I feel increasingly in the shadow?" Emily had to stop reading for a moment, her hands trembling violently. It was as if she were reading her own story written in the future. The last entry in the diary was from just 3 years ago. "I can't anymore. He says he loves me, and perhaps he does, but it's a love that devours. I feel as if I were disappearing, as if Catherine were dying one piece at a time. He has created a version of me that exists only for him, and I no longer know where this creation ends and where I begin. I need to get out of here before there's nothing left of me to save." Emily closed the diary with trembling hands, her heart beating erratically. Suddenly, Mrs. Walter's words made perfect sense. The housekeeper wasn't just concerned with gossip or social propriety. She was trying to protect Emily from the same fate that had consumed Catherine. A sound of footsteps in the corridor made Emily freeze. Quickly, she put the diary back in the drawer and left the room, carefully closing the door. She managed to return to her own room without being seen, but spent the rest of the night awake, Catherine's words echoing in her mind like a warning from beyond. For the first time since she had arrived at the mansion, Emily felt fear. Not physical fear, but something much worse. The fear of losing herself so gradually that she hadn't even noticed. The fear that Nathan's love was, in fact, a sophisticated form of prison. And the fear that perhaps it was already too late to escape. The following days were tortuous for Emily. Each loving gesture from Nathan, each sweet word, each unexpected gift now carried the dark weight of the discoveries in Catherine's diary. She tried to behave normally, but Nathan had a keen sensitivity to changes in her mood, and it didn't take long for him to notice that something was different. "You're distant," he observed one night, as they dined on the small private terrace that he had ordered prepared especially for their meetings. The table was set with crystal and silver, fresh flowers perfumed the air, and candles created a romantic atmosphere that should have filled Emily with happiness. Instead, she felt as if she were playing a role in a play whose ending she didn't. "No, I'm just tired," Emily lied, forcing a smile. Nathan leaned forward, his dark grey eyes studying every nuance of her expression. "You were never good at lying. It's one of the things I love most about you. Your transparency, your inability to dissimulate." The irony of the words hit her like a punch. Emily was becoming exactly the opposite of what he said he loved. She was learning to hide, to lie, to act, and all because of the growing fear she felt towards him. "Maybe I'm changing," she said, testing his reaction. Nathan's expression changed instantly, a shadow passing through his eyes. "Changing how? In what sense?" I don't know. Sometimes I feel as if I were losing pieces of myself, as if the Emily who was before were disappearing. Nathan rose from his chair and approached her, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands. My love, you aren't losing anything, you're gaining. You're becoming the incredible woman you always had the potential to be. And if I don't want to become that woman? Emily asked, finding a desperate courage. And if I want to continue being simply me? Nathan's fingers tightened around her hands, not enough to hurt, but enough for her to feel the intensity of his reaction. You don't know what you're saying. You're confused, scared of the changes. It's natural. Catherine went through the same process. The mention of Catherine made Emily's blood freeze. You talked about this with her, about her becoming a different person. Nathan was silent for a moment too long. When he finally spoke, his voice had a distant quality, as if he were revisiting painful memories. Catherine was complicated. She resisted love, fought against the happiness I wanted to give her. In the end, that resistance destroyed her. Destroyed how? Emily pressed, her heart beating rapidly. She began to have strange ideas, said I was trying to control her, when all I wanted was to protect her. She became paranoid, depressed, started to see enemies where there was only love. Emily felt as if she were at a crucial crossroads. She could accept Nathan's version, assume that Catherine had been an unstable woman who didn't know how to value the love she received, or she could trust what she had read in the diary, in Catherine's own voice, telling a very different story. Where is she now? She asked, carefully, observing Nathan's reaction. He moved away from her, returning to his chair with tense movements. I've already told you, she disappeared, left a letter saying she couldn't live like this anymore and simply was gone. May I see the letter? The question came out before Emily could contain it, and immediately she knew she had made a mistake. Nathan's expression closed completely, his eyes becoming hard as stone. Why would you want to see that? Why this? Sudden curiosity about Catherine? Emily tried to back away, but it was too late. I just wanted to understand better what happened, so as not to make the same mistakes. The same mistakes, Nathan repeated slowly, as if the words had a bitter taste. Are you comparing our situation with my relationship with Catherine? No, Are you thinking that I am some kind of monster, that Catherine was an innocent victim of my whims? Nathan's voice was rising in tone, a cold anger spreading through his words. Emily had never seen him like this, and the fear that had been growing inside her intensified. Of course not, she hurried to say. I just want to understand. Understand what? He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping on the stone floor. You want to understand why a woman would destroy the purest love that someone could offer, why she would choose madness instead of devotion? Emily remained silent, realizing that anything she said could worsen the situation. Nathan began to pace back and forth on the small terrace, his hands passing through his hair in a gesture of agitation that she was beginning to recognize as a sign of danger. Catherine was weak, he said finally, stopping to look at Emily with an intensity that made her shrink in the chair. She didn't know how to value what she had, didn't know how to recognize love when she found it. But you are different. You are stronger, more intelligent. You won't make the same mistakes she did. There was something in the way he said, these words that sounded more like an order than an observation. Emily nodded silently, instinctively understanding that disagreeing would be dangerous. That night, for the first time in weeks, Nathan didn't come to her room. Emily stayed awake until late, alternating between relief at being alone and a growing anxiety about what her curiosity about Catherine might have triggered. The next morning, she decided to seek out Mrs. Walters. The housekeeper was organizing bed linens in the closet of the main corridor when Emily approached. Mrs. Walters, she began hesitantly, may I ask a question about Mrs. Catherine? The older woman immediately stopped what she was doing, her eyes filling with a deep sadness. Girl, why do you want to stir up this story? Because I need to know the truth, Emily replied, with an honesty that surprised them both. I need to know what really happened to her. Mrs. Walters looked around, making sure they were alone, then pulled Emily to a more private corner of the corridor. "Catherine didn't disappear," she whispered, her voice charged with a fear that made Emily's stomach contract. "She's alive." "Where?" Emily asked, feeling as if the floor were moving beneath her feet. "In the east wing of the mansion, in a suite that Nathan ordered specially adapted for her. He said she had a nervous breakdown, that she needs special care, that it's dangerous for her to have contact with the outside world." Emily felt as if all the air had been sucked from her lungs. "She's a prisoner. I don't know what to think anymore," Mrs. Walters admitted, tears shining in her eyes. "At the beginning, she really seemed sick, confused. But as time passed, sometimes I see her at the window, and her eyes seem so lucid, so desperate. As if she were trying to tell me something that she can't speak out loud." Emily felt the world spin around her. Catherine hadn't disappeared. She was there in the same house, perhaps just a few meters away, prisoner of the man who claimed to love her, and Emily was following exactly the same path. Mrs. Walters' revelation echoed in Emily's mind for days. She tried to maintain her appearance of normality, but each moment beside Nathan now seemed charged with a suffocating tension. He seemed to notice her restlessness, becoming even more attentive, more present, as if he sensed that he needed to win her back from some invisible threat. "You seem worried lately," he commented one afternoon as he watched her paint in the studio. He was standing right behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders in a caress that should have been comforting, but that Emily now felt as a subtle form of control. "Is there something I can do to make you happier?" "I'm fine," Emily lied, keeping her eyes fixed on the canvas. She was painting a garden, but the colors always seemed to transform into darker tones, as if her anguish manifested unconsciously through the brushes. "Perhaps you need a change of air," Nathan suggested, his hands moving to gently massage her neck. "We can travel if you want. Paris, Rome, any place that awakens your artistic interest." The irony of the suggestion wasn't lost on Emily. He offered the whole world, but at the same time created an increasingly sophisticated prison. "And Catherine?" she asked before she could contain herself. "Did she also like to travel?" Nathan's fingers stiffened on her neck, a pressure slightly stronger. That made Emily immediately regret the question. "Why do you continue asking about Catherine? This obsession isn't healthy." "It's not an obsession," Emily replied, trying to keep her voice firm. "It's natural curiosity. You lived with her for years. It's normal that I want to understand." "Understand what?" Nathan's voice was dangerously low. "What is there to understand about a woman who chose madness instead of love?" Emily turned in the chair to face him, and what she saw in his eyes made her freeze. There was a coldness there, a hardness that she had never noticed before, or perhaps had never wanted to notice. "Did she really choose?" Emily asked, finding a desperate courage. "Or was she pushed toward that choice?" The silence that followed was charged with danger. Nathan looked at her with an expression that Emily couldn't decipher, as if he were seeing a stranger in the place of the woman he loved. "You're becoming exactly like her," he said finally, his voice charged with a bitter disappointment. "Suspicious, paranoid, seeing conspiracy where there is only love." "Or maybe I'm just beginning to see the truth," Emily replied, rising from the chair. "Where is she, Nathan? Where is Catherine, really?" The question exploded between them like a bomb. Nathan stepped back, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "How do you—" "I know she didn't disappear," Emily interrupted, the words coming out in a torrent that she could no longer contain. "I know she's in this house somewhere where you keep her. I know that you did to her exactly what you're doing to me, isolating her, controlling her, making her believe it's for her own good." The transformation in Nathan's face was terrifying. The mask of the devoted lover fell completely, revealing something cold and calculating that made Emily instinctively back away. "You understand nothing," he said, his voice now low and threatening. "Everything I did was out of love. Catherine was losing herself, destroying herself with her crazy ideas of independence. I saved her from herself." Saved or imprisoned? The difference is irrelevant when it comes to protecting someone we love. At that moment, Emily knew she was in real danger. The man she had learned to love was just a facet of someone much darker and more dangerous. "I want to see her," she said, trying to keep her voice firm. "I want to see Catherine." Nathan laughed, a humorless sound that echoed sinisterly in the studio. "You want to see Catherine? Very well, perhaps it is indeed time for you two to meet." He left the studio, and Emily followed him with her heart beating erratically. They walked in silence through the corridors of the mansion until they reached a door that Emily had never seen open. Nathan took a key from his pocket and turned it in the lock with a sound that sounded like a death sentence. "Catherine," he called, pushing the door. "You have a visitor." What Emily saw made her put her hand to her mouth to contain a scream. Catherine was sitting in an armchair near the window, wearing a silk robe that had once been luxurious but now seemed faded and neglected. Her hair, which in the portrait photographs was long and shining, was now cut irregularly, as if she herself had cut it with whatever object she could find. But it was her eyes that most shocked Emily. They weren't the eyes of a madwoman, as Nathan had suggested. They were the eyes of someone who had been systematically broken, but who still maintained a spark of sanity and determination. "So you're the new one," Catherine said, her voice hoarse from disuse but still charged with a sharp intelligence. "You're just like me when I arrived here. Young, in love, convinced that you found true love." "Catherine," Nathan began, but she interrupted him with a look of pure contempt. "Let me talk to her," Catherine said, rising from the armchair, with movements that revealed a physical weakness that contrasted with the strength in her voice. "You owe me at least that after 3 years. 3 years of care, of protection," Nathan corrected, but there was a tension in his voice that revealed that even he knew how empty his words sounded. Catherine approached Emily, and she could see the marks that isolation had left, the unnatural paleness, the atrophied muscles from lack of exercise, but mainly the deep sadness that emanated from every pore. "He will tell you it's for your own good," Catherine whispered, coming close, enough that Emily could smell her, an expensive perfume mixed with the odor of someone who had spent too much time in closed spaces. "He will convince you that the world out there is dangerous, that only he can protect you. He will isolate you from everyone you love until he is the only person in your life." "That's not true," Emily said, but her voice came out weak, without conviction. "No?" Catherine smiled bitterly. "How many friends do you have now? How many people you knew before coming here are still part of your life? When was the last time you made a decision without first considering what he would think?" Each question hit Emily like a physical blow, because the answers were all the same. None, no one, never. "You see?" Catherine continued, her eyes filling with tears. "He is a master at making this seem like love. He's an artist of emotional manipulation. And when you finally realize what's happening, it's already too late. You're already so broken, so dependent, that you can no longer imagine a life without him." "Enough," Nathan intervened, moving to place himself between the two women. "Catherine, you're scaring Emily with your sick fantasies." "Fantasies?" Catherine laughed, a sound that was simultaneously hysterical and completely lucid. "Tell her about the cameras, Nathan. Tell her about how you monitor my every movement. Tell her about the sedatives you put in my food when you consider I'm getting too agitated." Emily looked at Nathan, searching for a denial, an explanation that would make all of this make sense in a less terrible way. But what she saw in his eyes was confirmation. He didn't deny anything. He simply stood there, observing her with an expression that mixed sick love with implacable determination. "Now you know," he said finally. "Now you understand how far I'm capable of going for love. The question is, will you learn from Catherine's example, or will you repeat the same mistakes that brought her here?" Nathan's question hung in the air like a sentence. Emily looked at Catherine, then at him, feeling as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice where each choice led to destruction. The raw truth was before her. The man she had fallen in love with was a sophisticated emotional predator, capable of transforming love into prison with a terrifying mastery. "You won't keep me here," Emily said, finding a strength she didn't know she possessed. "I'm not Catherine. I won't let myself be broken. The smile that spread across Nathan's face was cold as ice. My dear Emily, you're already broken. You just haven't realized it yet. He approached her with calculated movements, like a predator, circling its prey. Where will you go? Back to that miserable village? To do what? You have nothing, you are nothing without me. I was someone before I met you, Emily retorted, but her voice trembled slightly. You were an orphan with no future, living on others' charity, Nathan responded cruelly. I gave you purpose, developed talent, a life that millions of women would envy. And you want to throw all of that away for what? For an abstract concept of freedom? Catherine approached, placing a trembling hand on Emily's arm. Don't listen to him. Freedom isn't an abstract concept. It's breathing without fear. It's making decisions without having to calculate the consequences on another person's mood. Here it's being yourself, not an edited version of what someone wants you to be. Shut up, Catherine, Nathan said, his voice sharp as a razor. You've already caused enough damage. Damage? Catherine laughed bitterly. The only damage here is what you did to us. Look at me, Emily, look closely. This is what happens when you surrender to his sick love. 3 years being slowly erased until almost nothing remains of the person I was. Emily observed Catherine, the paleness, the trembling of her hands, the way she involuntarily shrank whenever Nathan moved. But she also saw something else, a fierce determination burning behind the apparent fragility. How did you survive? Emily asked in a low voice. By keeping secrets, Catherine whispered. By pretending to be more broken than I really was. He relaxes his vigilance when he believes he has completely won. Nathan watched the exchange between them with an increasingly somber expression. Enough of this conversation. Emily, you're coming with me now. You need to rest, forget these toxic ideas that Catherine is planting in your head. No, Emily said simply. The word echoed in the room like a shot. Nathan stood motionless, as if he couldn't process that she had dared to disobey him directly. What did you say? I said no, I'm not going with you. I'm not going to pretend this is normal. I'm not going to let myself be transformed into a version of myself that exists only to satisfy your sick needs. The transformation in Nathan was instantaneous and terrifying. All the civilized facade disappeared, revealing a cold and calculating anger that made Emily truly understand the danger she was in. You don't understand, he said, his voice low and threatening. It's not a choice. You're going to stay here. Because I can't let you go. I can't risk you hurting yourself out there or finding someone who will take you away from me. Did you hear that? Catherine addressed Emily. It's not about protection. It's about possession. He can't bear the idea that we might exist independently of him. Nathan moved quickly, grabbing Emily by the arm with enough force to leave marks. You're going to your room now. You're going to think about everything I've given you, everything I've given up for you, and you're going to stop this childish rebellion. Let go of me, Emily said, trying to free herself. Not until you understand that this is for your own good. It was then that Emily realized she had reached the moment of truth. Either she submitted now, accepted the fate of becoming another. Catherine, or she fought with all the strength she still possessed. Catherine, she said, keeping her voice firm despite the fear, you know this house better than anyone. Is there any way to get out of here without being seen? Catherine looked at Emily with an expression of surprise and growing admiration. There's a tunnel, she whispered quickly, in the basement, behind the wine cellar. It was built during the colonial era as an escape route. It leads directly to the beach. Have you both gone mad? Nathan tightened his grip on Emily's arm even more. No one is leaving here. Emily, you're going to your room now and Catherine is going back to hers. I need to think about how to handle this situation. How long have you been planning this? Emily asked, looking directly into his eyes. Since the first day, since the first look in the gardens. Nathan hesitated for a moment, and in that hesitation Emily saw confirmation of her worst fears. Everything had been calculated from the beginning, her hiring, the gradual isolation, even the construction of the studio. She had been chosen as prey from the moment she stepped into the mansion. "You don't understand," he said finally. "Everything I did was because of the love I feel for you, a pure, absolute love that transcends petty social conventions." "This isn't love," Emily replied, her voice gaining strength with each word. "It's obsession, it's sickness, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being a victim of it." With a sudden movement that surprised Nathan, Emily freed herself from his arm and ran toward the door. He tried to follow her, but Catherine threw herself between them, using her own body as a barrier. "Run!" Catherine shouted. "Run now!" Emily hesitated for a fraction of a second, looking at the woman who had sacrificed any chance of escape to give her an opportunity. "I'll come back for you," she promised. "No," Catherine smiled through the tears. "Live. Live for us both." Emily ran through the corridors of the mansion, hearing behind her Nathan's shouts and the sound of struggle coming from Catherine's room. Her bare feet barely touched the marble floor as she ran toward the basement, praying that she would find the tunnel before Nathan caught up with her. Behind her, she could hear his voice echoing through the corridors. "Emily, come back here. You don't understand what you're doing. You're making a terrible mistake." But for the first time in months, Emily was absolutely certain that she was doing the right thing. She was fighting for her life, for her sanity, for her right to exist as a whole person, and not as a porcelain doll in the collection of a sick man. The basement was dark and damp, but Emily managed to find the wine cellar and, behind it, a small wooden door that seemed not to have been opened for decades. With trembling hands, she managed to open it, revealing a narrow tunnel that smelled of sea and freedom. Without looking back, Emily crawled through the tunnel toward the sound of the waves, knowing that each meter took her away from the man who had almost destroyed her soul, and closer to a chance to rebuild her life. Emily emerged from the tunnel onto the beach like a person being cast back from the sea, breathless, trembling, but alive. The full moon illuminated the waves breaking on the sand, and for the first time in months, she breathed air that didn't taste of the mansion, of control, of fear. Her hands were bleeding from scratches against the stones of the tunnel, but the physical pain was almost welcome after the emotional agony she had experienced. She knew she didn't have much time. Nathan would discover the tunnel and come after her. She ran along the beach until she found the road that led to the village, where she managed to stop a truck that took her to Miami. During the 3-hour journey, Emily remained silent, processing everything that had happened, planning the next steps. Her first stop was at the police station. The sheriff, a middle-aged man with tired but kind eyes, listened to her story with growing skepticism until she mentioned Catherine. His expression changed immediately. "The missing wife of the Blackwoods," he murmured. "There was an investigation 3 years ago, but we never found evidence of a crime." "Because she never disappeared," Emily explained, describing in detail the location of the room where Catherine was being kept. "He keeps her prisoner, feeds her sedatives, convinced everyone that she's crazy." The sheriff made some calls, and within 2 hours an operation was being mounted. Emily insisted on accompanying the team back to the mansion, despite protests about her safety. When they arrived at the property, they found Nathan in the garden, sitting calmly in a wrought iron chair, as if he were waiting for them. He offered no resistance when he was arrested, just looked at Emily with an expression of deep disappointment. "You destroyed everything we built together," he said, as the handcuffs were placed on his wrists. "Threw away the opportunity of a perfect life." "It wasn't a life," Emily replied, meeting him face to face for the last time. "It was an existence. There's a difference." Catherine was found exactly where Emily had said she would be, sedated but alive. When the paramedics brought her out of the mansion on a stretcher, she managed to hold Emily's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, her words almost inaudible. "You did what I never had the courage to do." "No," Emily replied, squeezing her hand. "Sayu gave me courage. You saved my life by showing me what I could become." The following months were difficult. Emily had to testify several times, relive the traumas, repeatedly explain how she had been manipulated. Nathan hired expensive lawyers who tried to discredit her testimony, suggesting that she had been a willing accomplice and now sought revenge for having been rejected. But the evidence was irrefutable. Catherine's diary, the cameras found in her room, the medications without prescription, and mainly the testimony of the two women who had lived under his control. Nathan was sentenced to 15 years in prison for unlawful imprisonment, bodily harm, and a series of other crimes. Catherine recovered slowly. The years of isolation and forced medication had taken a high toll, but she had an inner strength that had been only dormant, never broken. The two women became close friends, united by their shared experience and the mutual understanding that they had survived. Emily returned to the village where she had grown up, but not as the orphan without prospects who had left. She carried with her not only the artistic skills she had developed, but also an inner strength forged in adversity. She established a small studio in a rented house near the beach and began to paint again, this time complete portraits, entire faces, people in all their human complexity. Her paintings had a quality that attracted attention. There was an emotional intensity in them, a deep understanding of human nature that came from someone who had looked directly into the abyss and chosen not to fall into it. Soon she had commissions from all over the region, and her reputation as an artist began to grow. 2 years after the escape, Emily was finishing a portrait of a local family when she heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find a man of about 30 with gentle eyes and a hesitant smile. "Are you Emily?" he asked. "My name is Alex. I'm a doctor at the Miami hospital. Catherine Blackwood told me about you." Emily invited him in, curious. Alex explained that he had treated Catherine during her recovery and that he had become her friend. "She showed me some of your paintings," he said, observing the canvases scattered around the studio. "They're extraordinary. There's an honesty in them that is rare." "Catherine has always been a good friend," Emily replied, preparing coffee. "She told me your story," Alex said carefully, "about what you went through. I must say I admire your courage." Emily observed the man before her. There was something genuinely respectful in his manner of speaking, a complete absence of the possessive intensity that she had learned to recognize as a sign of danger. "Why are you here?" she asked directly. Alex smiled, a little embarrassed. "Honestly? Because Catherine said I should meet you. Said you were one of the strongest people she knew and that I would be a fool if I didn't at least try a conversation." Emily laughed, a genuine sound that hadn't come from her throat for a long time. Catherine was always very direct. "It's a quality I appreciate," Alex replied. "After everything she went through, I think she lost patience for games and subterfuge." They talked for hours. Alex spoke about his work at the hospital, about his passion for helping people in vulnerable situations. Emily told about her art, about how she had found in painting a way to process her experiences. There was no pressure, no hidden agenda, just two people getting to know each other without rush. When Alex rose to leave, it was already almost night. "May I come back?" he asked. "I would like to see more of your paintings, and I would like to get to know you better." Emily studied him for a moment, looking for the signs she had learned to recognize, but all she saw was sincerity and genuine respect. "You may come back," she said finally, "but slowly. I need things at my own pace." "Of course," Alex nodded. "At your pace, in your time, on your terms." He returned the following week, then the next, then regularly. Not as someone trying to conquer her or change her, but as a genuine friend who appreciated who she was. It took months for Emily to allow the relationship to evolve into something romantic, and when she did, it was a conscious and free choice. Alex never tried to change her schedules, never questioned her friendships, never suggested that she needed to be protected from the world. Instead, he supported her, celebrated her achievements, respected her independence, and offered companionship without demanding possession in return. 3 years after her escape from the mansion, Emily was preparing her first individual exhibition in Miami when Catherine appeared in the studio, radiant with health and energy. "You did it," Catherine said, observing the paintings that would be exhibited. "You not only survived, you flourished." "We did it," Emily corrected. "You showed me the way out." "And you had the courage to walk it," Catherine smiled. "How is Alex?" Well, respectful, kind, patient. Sometimes I'm still surprised that someone can love without wanting to possess. That's true love, Catherine said. What we experienced with Nathan wasn't love. It was emotional hunger, sick need, control disguised as devotion. Emily nodded, finally understanding the difference that had taken so long to learn. True love didn't diminish the loved person, but made them grow. It didn't isolate them, but connected them with the world. It didn't control them, but freed them to be fully themselves. On the night of the opening of the exhibition, Emily was surrounded by friends, fellow artists, and admirers of her work. Alex was by her side, proud but not possessive, supporting her without trying to be the center of attention. Catherine had traveled from New York, where she now worked as a therapist, helping other victims of abusive relationships. Observing the people admiring her paintings, Emily remembered the 17-year-old girl who had arrived at the Blackwood mansion with only a backpack and a sketchbook. That girl had almost been lost, but in the process of finding herself again, she had become someone stronger, wiser, more complete. Her art now portrayed not just pain and struggle, but also hope and redemption. Each canvas told a story of people in their totality, with their flaws and virtues, their shadows and their light, their fears and their courage. "Are you happy?" Alex asked in a low voice, watching her contemplate her own journey. Emily looked around, at Catherine animatedly conversing with other visitors, at her paintings that told the story of her own transformation, at the man beside her who loved her without trying to change her. "Yes," she answered with complete honesty. "I am happy, and for the first time in my life, I know that I deserve this happiness." Love had almost destroyed her, but it had also taught her the difference between loving and being loved in a healthy way. Nathan had tried to make her a porcelain doll in his private collection, but Emily had chosen to be a woman of flesh and blood, with her own will and right to happiness. And in that choice, she had found not just freedom, but also true love. The kind that liberates instead of imprisoning, that strengthens instead of weakening, that celebrates individuality instead of trying to erase it. The Blackwood mansion was now empty, being slowly consumed by time and the plants that Emily had once cared for. But from it, Emily had taken not the memories of prison, but the strength she had discovered she had, and the certainty that she would always be able to choose freedom over the security of the golden cage.